Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing more of the Patience is a Virtue seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which at the start of our turn, every card in our hand will get randomly transformed into a card that costs 1 provision more. That means that it's very hard to build a deck for this event, but there are ways to increase your chances of success. And today we're playing a new faction that we've never played before in this event, so let's go take a look at the deck. Alright, so we've already made deck guides in the past for most of the most effective factions and archetypes in this event, but today we're going to try something new. We're going to try playing a Monstrous deck, which I think is going to be a significant challenge, but for all of you Monstrous players out there that really want a Monstrous deck for this event, this is at least my best attempt to make a viable deck in this event. So it'll be Fruits of Ysgith, which means we can start out by playing a Thrive unit, which should be a pretty reliable way of generating some points over the course of a round, and then outside of that, we have a few big cards like Regis Reborn, which we're going to see if we can get some bleed in order to set this up a bit as a potential card for us to tutor from our deck as a big finisher at the end of round 3. Similar story with Unseen Elder as another big card we want to keep in our deck, where this one doesn't need to be a finisher per se. In fact, we'd actually prefer for it to be happening earlier on, and then that does help to set up Regis if we can also find a way to get Regis later on. Then Old Speartip. Similar story, just a huge point slam that we could use at any point in time if we happen to get a tutor for him. And it is worth noting that outside of that, we are pretty much willing to have almost any card in our hand. We do have Devotion, so that means any card that has extra value on Devotion is getting that full value, and I think chief among those cards is Unseen Elder, so even better if we get Unseen Elder or get a random Unseen Elder for that reason. We also do not have any duplicate cards in our decks. That means cards like Redea or Shoop Stay Off, we can also use those to full effect as well. We have a few cards that we would like to keep in our deck, but are not the end of the world if they end up in our hand, because they can still transform into a card that is probably going to be usable, because they're mid-rangey. Things like Winter Queen, where if we happen to find a way to get Frost in both rows, then we could summon her out from our deck onto the board, giving us 4 extra points of value, which, because, since we're Devotion, we don't have cards like Roach or Nekkers, it's a little bit harder to make things like that work. So Winter Queen worth a few more points than they are, especially if our opponent passes when we still have Frost on one of our opponent's rows. But other than that, we also have a little bit of a different story here, but Old Speartip Asleep is mostly a way to make sure that we get Old Speartip from our deck. So that's also an option. And then if we get Naglfar, or we can keep Naglfar in our deck if we happen to find a tutor for special cards, and this could potentially give us one of our big gold cards hanging out in our deck that we're trying to hold on to and save for the right occasion. Somewhat similar story for Crimson Curse, worth a lot in terms of damage from the bleed and setup for our other vampires if we do find a time to play Regis Reborn later on, and even spawning in those 2 Ekimaras in one of our rows, 6 points right there, so that's still solid value as well. And then outside of that, also Ard Gaeth, which is our way of, if we do find a way to get this, guaranteeing that we get Frost on both of our opponent's rows, and that'll summon out the Winter Queen. But other than that, it is basically just cards that are pretty well spread out across the different provisions, so as is usually the case in this event, it means you want to try to spread out the provisions of cards in your hand, because if everything costs the same number of provisions, then that means you're going to start out with probably a bunch of weak cards, and then as time goes on, they all get stronger, which is great, but then at the end of the round, suddenly everything reaches 14 provisions, and everything is a scenario, and almost nothing is playable, and the cards that you don't play will loop back around to 4 provisions, and then they all turn into bricks. So you want to try to keep the cards in your hand relatively spread out from a provision standpoint, and then, within reason, play the highest provision cost card from your hand so that you're not going to find yourself in that situation where every turn you're forced into playing a scenario that you just don't have the setup to actually trigger. And, you know, if you're not about to have something turn into a scenario, then, of course, by all means, absolutely just play whatever the best card in your hand happens to be. So there's a look at the deck, and like I said, I think it is going to be tricky. There's a reason why we have not made a Monsters deck for this event yet, because it's not the most natural of fits, but we hopefully get just enough value out of our leader ability when combined with some big cards that we have hanging out on our deck, if we can get those tutored out, which is not a given, but if we can, that is definitely a big help as well. So let's go see it in action. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here, and they'll go first. Okay, and we drew into 2 of our biggest cards here, Old Speartip and Regis Reborn, so we'd probably like to put those back into our deck here. Okay, they'll start with Small Blood Totem, which is a decent point slam. And then we had a couple of reasonably large cards in our hand here, provision cost-wise. One of them turned into Redea, and the other one, I think, is what turned into Burn a Seal. So this is a good point slam. If we go range row, it, plays for 11? But if we go with Redea, we do not have duplicate cards in our deck, so we are able to spawn in a stratagem. So I think we go here, and we go for neutral. And let's see what our options are. First scroll to guarantee we get in one of our big cards. That could be very useful. Or Ceremonial Dagger for extra damage and bleed to help set up some of our big cards. Poison. Not sure we're going to have enough to get removal out of that, so that's maybe a little bit more of a risk. Also, I forgot to use our leader ability. I always forget to do. But, might go Curse Scroll. So yeah, we missed one turn of the boost on the Thrive for Gunnakor's Fruit, but every single time I play Fruits of Ysgith, I will, without a doubt, forget to use this on my first turn. It's, you know, it just happens that way. Okay, Cave Troll is a defender and a bit of a point slam, as they convert their cultists into bear abominations using the totem. And so now what we want to do is either play our highest provision cost card right now, which is the Great Oak, because if we don't play it now, then it's going to suddenly turn into, I mean, at 13, we might get Oneiromancy, which would be great, but we risk getting close to the point where if that 13 provision cost card isn't good, next turn is probably a 14 provision scenario, which we probably don't want to use. So, and then if we don't play that, then it turns to a 4 provision cost card, it's weak, and we have to wait a long time for it to become strong again. So, point is, play Great Oak. If not, it's probably what we're going to want to swap out using Curse Scroll. I think it's good enough that it is worth playing here. And given how they have a defender that is not great to, or at least we can't get through that armor, I think we're just looking for the pure boost here. Which means we want to play it all the way here. Oh, I thought that Curse Scroll counted. I guess not. Okay, War Council. To potentially get something useful out from their deck. It's Letho. We don't have a great option. They actually go for Gunnakor's Fruit. Because remember, it does not change power when they do that. So they couldn't just transform into Great Oak and get a bunch of power. They could have gone for a second defender if they wanted to, but this is really the only card on the board that continues to gain value over time. So now what we're looking at is, let's just take a quick peek at what Marching Orders gives us. Potentially Regis, but it has not been set up at all. Or, it is Regis, guaranteed. Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We'd probably prefer to do some additional setup. And early Eskel is not bad, but we do want to bear in mind, if Curse Scroll is here for the intention of getting Unseen Elder, then we'd like to do that early. We could wait around, and if we want to play it later, we could use it to get Old Speartip as a point slam instead. Because thus far, our hands have been solid. I think we're fine sticking with Eskel here. Okay, except they're going to steal Eskel, unfortunately. I'm actually a little surprised. Well, I guess over time he might have become bigger than the Great Oak. So, Mata is a trap in this event, because bear in mind you're going to draw into your highest card, which in our case would be, I think it's Regis, right? He's a 13. Unseen Elder is just 12. Yeah, so it'd be Regis, except because you can't play him on the same turn you draw into him. By the time your next turn comes around, rather than playing him, he transforms to a 14 provision cost card, which is probably a scenario, so you completely brick what would otherwise be the best card distributor from your deck. So don't do that. Mata is a trap. Last Wish actually could be relevant, oddly enough. G-Troll, unlikely for that to work. Don't have the coins for more reels, so it's just damage, but it'd be on a defender, which is not helpful. Viper, yeah, unlikely. Could go with the defender, which when we have... When we have a tall unit like this out there, there is something to be said for that. There is something to be said for that. Okay, then it's... Philippe, wait. On our defender plus their stratagem means they can, on their next turn, immediately get rid of... Oh, no. Just one status on you. So what, it's lock first? Technically, no. If they do the order of operations correctly and go poison from you and then Philippe, they can remove this on their next turn. Unless we get rid of Philippe, which we could do with Vilgefortz is guaranteed. Other sources of damage, but they are not enough. If we were to use our stratagem, also not going to be enough here. So, assuming they play this properly, we really should get rid of Philippe, even if there are other intriguing cards like Ernachad or the Cachet here. I think it needs to be done. I think it... except they have a defender, so we can't do that. Alright, in that case... Cachet or Ernachad? We'll go Cachet. We'll go Cachet. We'll embrace the Thrive. It will take a little bit of time for this to work. On our next turn it works, yeah. Okay, they did do it in the right order. Okay, but as we said, there's, as it turns out, basically nothing we could have done to stop them, given how they hid Philippe behind a defender. Really, go for the card that we can get back automatically first. That surprises me a bit. Ooh. Ooh, this is interesting. Scoundrel. 12 points. Definitely triggering Thrives, actually, before we do anything. Before we do anything. This. But, what if we put Melusine next to our Thrive units? She will damage them, yes. However, because they get boosted by Thrive, we're basically going to cancel those two things out, and that means that it's going to be that much easier to proc all these Thrives continuously and spawn in more Endrega Larvae, and this one's going to tank the first damage anyway with its armor. So I like that a lot. Okay, Ceres, they're getting up to the point where they're getting high provision cost cards. Now they're giving Doomed to the Great Oak because it's our tallest unit. They can't do anything about Melusine because she is the Veil. Out of curiosity, we do have a Cave Troll that we could bring back with Renew, which would be kind of tempting right about now, especially since I'm not really sure we can get much in the way of value out of Ice. And Brothans, we do not have a Disloyal unit in our starting deck, so yes, he's Assimilate, which is really strong in this event, but not nearly the ways to proc Assimilate you would normally have in a Nilfgaard deck. So I think it's Renew. I think it is Renew. And the biggest problem here is just that we're going to run out of space in this row quite quickly. And I think we still do this. I think we still keep the Thrive units next to Melusine, because then Melusine continues to keep it possible to trigger those Thrives. Even if we could have tanked the damage with the Cave Troll, there is something to... I guess we don't care as much about proccing this Thrive as we do for this Thrive. So yeah, you might have been able to make a case for putting the Cave Troll in between these two. But we still have our big finisher that we can get with Curse Scroll into likely Old Speartip. So that's 12 points whenever we need it. But we only need it if our hand is not good. So once again, they're going to try to go after the Cave Troll with Philippe. But part of the reason why we were willing to sacrifice the Cave Troll like this was because we knew that the Great Oak was going to be a quick victim if we did not protect it with the Cave Troll. Ooh. Okay, so here's the thing. Remember when I said this row is going to get pretty crowded? This row is going to get completely full when we play She Who Knows, but it's totally worth it. But the thing is that it is totally worth it, so we're going to do it anyway. Even if it means we aren't getting the additional Endrega Larva spawned in here, we're still proccing a bunch of Thrives, so that's good value. And if we do end up playing an additional turn, then we still can go with Curse Scroll into something big. Which is especially relevant because then we will suddenly have room for another Thrive unit, and these are going to be pretty difficult to play. You're likely to turn into a scenario. You may play into something, or turn into something that is not all that enticing as well. Maybe you'll turn into a Near, in which case we don't need to use this Curse Scroll, which would be pretty sweet. Okay, they got rid of our defender. But now they have a bunch of things that, oh no, they're gonna want to control with Philippe. Except they have other forms of control, and we have other forms of resilience. Oh boy. We'll take it. We will absolutely take it. Still pass. And that means we win round 1 on even, have 10 points of carryover. And I'm liking the way things are looking for us right now. And actually, what happened was that Melusine was our highest base power unit because she increased her base power, but because she had Veil, she was not able to get that resilience. So as it turns out, we did not actually get any resilience, which, maybe we should have seen that coming. We should get rid of Old Speartip, and we should get rid of Regis, as those are cards we'd like to still keep in our deck. So we still won round 1 on even. That's great. We unfortunately may have technically prevented ourselves from getting the resilience that we were looking for. The question now becomes, do we try to bleed them out in this round and maybe force them into using this leader ability? I mean, I don't know. Might not be a huge factor. Or do we force them to go a card down and give us double last say in round 3? That might still be preferable, to tell you the truth. I think it is, even if they end up blocking our leader ability. Okay, so Stragobor, which actually will trigger. The lowering cards down to 1 power is not going to be a factor, because these cards are going to transform before we get the chance to use them anyway. But they'll win round 2. Okay, so now we're mostly looking at provision cost management, trying to make sure that we get solid provision cost cards in that 8 to 12-ish range, ideally for the entirety of this round 3. And so that means we're looking for cards that start out at on the lower end of that range, like 6, 7, 8, maybe even 5s. Definitely not 11s, because we'd be forced into playing that right off the bat, and we'd like to keep Old Speartip in our deck so we can potentially summon it out. So that means you're going to turn into 11. That's probably going to be the first card we want to play, or maybe a 9. Maybe a 7, depending on what we get access to. We should probably swap you out. Okay, well, we had no setup on Regis, so he wasn't really going to turn into anything anyway. He's going to turn into a 14 at the start of this turn, which actually can be significant, because although there are a bunch of scenarios at 14, there's also Phooca. And because we have, I believe it is a 17 points. Yes, a 17-point Melusine in our graveyard right now. If we could get that back, that would be amazing, and we can. And we can. So, yeah, they locked our leader ability as expected, but, I mean, you can't say no to this, right? You just can't say no to a 17-point Melusine. So we may not have gotten the resilience we were looking for, but we got a different form of carryover with Melusine. Now, this, of course, is absolutely just begging for them to use some kind of tall removal on it, so we are very much looking for some way to protect that Melusine as soon as possible. The fact that she has Veil helps a little bit, but probably going to be in need of a defender here. Okay, it's Ruin, which is not a great card if you can't get the Death Wish to trigger, and that is not the easiest thing to do. So I'm feeling okay about that, not to mention we could... no, we can't quite steal it. Can't get the destruction on Leo either. Not loving our options here, to be honest. We might need to play our doll, because at 12 provisions, if we don't play him, then he's going to turn into a 13, which has a chance of being, Nero, which we could get for Unseen Elder or Old Speartip, but that's pretty unlikely. I'm not sure we really want to take that risk, because there are some 13s that require that you use a lot of 13s that require that you have a specific type of deck, specific type of archetype to build around that we just don't realistically have here. So I think we are going our doll. I'll try not to row stack too much. So now that means next play is likely to be whatever Leo turns into, because he is our highest provision cost card, I believe, at the moment. He'll be an 11 once he transforms. But defenders are all 9s. So that is a number to keep an eye out for. Herald can technically damage your own units, which you normally would do on Herald's Pals, but you could potentially do it to set up Ruin. Speaking of defenders, here's one. We also have Cadaverin. Actually not sure what happens if you use Damien when you've been locked via lockdown. Not sure that's worth doing. So we probably play it simple here. And go for Azur. Yeah, we do have Dominance, so Nithral is not a bad option either. But I think to try to protect Melusine, this is worth doing. And sure, we'll pay the tribute just to get an extra defender body down there, just in case they do a way to deal with one of them. There are still ways to break through the defender to hit Melusine, and they're more common than usual in this event because they tend to be high provision cost cards, which do pop up every now and again. Isbel, fortunately, is not one of them. Card draw could help us, for what it's worth. Okay, so, let's see. Morkvarg, they don't have anything that's highly boosted. That's not super helpful. Usurper might be the best option for us. That's a 9-point slam. Phoenix doesn't mean much at this point in the game. Oriana. We don't have any other vampires, and we don't have any other bleeding. So, it's not exactly the circumstance in which Oriana thrives, even if she would normally synergize with, if we had Unseen Elder, that'd be great, but we don't. So, I think it is just a simple Usurper point slam. And let's go melee row a little bit here, just so we're not completely row stacking in this row here. Okay, Tin Boy can hit through all those defenders for what it's worth. Here's Isbel. Looks like they gave us Philippe, which turned into Yorveth, which is not particularly helpful. We do have some interesting options here. Wild Boar of the Sea is a high provision cost card. We are going to want to play it soon. That or Gerhardt. This is here for damage, which would include destroying Herald's Pal, which would deal some damage to us. Then again, they're going to destroy it on their turn if we don't do it now. It does damage everyone else, so it's really getting, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 damage that we care about. So really kind of like a 9-point play. So that is not really damage we want to deal. Gerhardt is better than that, to be honest. Sayas, she's a 10, okay. Yeah. Yorveth is a 9, so yeah, I think it's Gerhardt. And with Gerhardt, we're probably going to go straight into this in order to get the Pact, unless we don't have anything for teleportation, do we? No. Let's use Pact on you, because it is a low card. So, I mean, then again, if they have Tall Removal, they're not about to use it on this guy. They're going to use it on Melusine, right? It's Kelly. Who has more units? They might. Except maybe not after that. This is a terrible idea. And so is this. Basically the unit version of this card. These are the kinds of things that we really don't want our opponent to ever find. So, we could go Rune Mage, go Nilfgaard, and see if we find a form of lock, which is not likely, but it's reasonably possible, and do that to try to shut down Kelly, because that could become a bit of a factor. I mean, what? Or we might lose Azur. Otherwise, we go with another Usurper. I mean, honestly, Rune Mage might be worth more than Usurper, although Usurper has 12 provision, whereas Rune Mage is 10. So if we don't play Usurper, we're going to really need to play it next turn. I think we do need to do this. But what we'll do is actually, we'll play Usurper. We'll deliberately not yet use this ability, so they have one more unit on their side of the board, which means Kelly is not as effective as they might have otherwise anticipated. Erland, unfortunately, their deck is tiny. Okay, whew, don't worry. Shouldn't be a big deal. And yes, well, I mean, okay, so it destroyed the card that we were going to steal. But it prevented us from, I mean, basically, it was either going to get destroyed on our side of the board or destroyed on their side of the board. Take your pick. Now, 12, 11. So we should play one of our 12s. We only have Phooca in our graveyard in terms of Skellige cards, but she's obviously not a warrior. So that doesn't really work all that well for us. Probably looking at War Elephant in that case, and you're an aristocrat, not a soldier. You are a soldier. You are not a soldier. You are a soldier. You are not a soldier. Can't quite get the crew. Can't quite get the crew. But maybe we go here. And that way, if we do end up damaging you, it gets rid of one of our taller, or lowers down one of our taller units. I mean, again, if they want to do tall removal, they're going to do it here. And if they, for whatever reason, can't do it here, they're going to do it there. But this is their last play. And we destroyed one of our cards through Melusine, so Kelly is potentially going to backfire, and Regis has no setup, so he's not that big for them. They get the boost on Erlen, which is honestly a little bit bigger than I expected. Leader ability gives them a bit of a point slam as well. But Kelly backfires, and that means that we are fine here. We don't even need to play either of our last two cards because we will hold on for the win. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here, and they'll go first. Okay, so we have a bunch of our weak cards in hand here, which, I mean, they'll transform, of course. They'll evolve into higher provision cost cards, but we're going to get a bunch of 4s turning into 5s, a few 5s turning into 6s, which might mean we can get some engines, but it's going to be a little bit trickier. We'd like to keep Wild Hunt Rider in deck, because there's the potential to summon this out later on, so we'll dump that, similar with Archespore, though. And Unseen Elder, the one high provision cost card we have here, but this is too high to be all that useful, because it'll transform into a 13, which we'd basically have to play immediately, otherwise it'd transform into a scenario. And it's also a card that we'd like to keep in deck, in case we do find a tutor. So we're off for what is likely to be a slow round 1, but if we can get some early engines, then we might have some long-term potential. Saber-tooth Tiger normally would be very good, on the assumption that we'd only be able to play 1 unit per turn, but because we have our leader ability, we can make a point of using this and whatever other unit we play in the same row, and that should shut down Saber-tooth Tiger, at least for the time being, or play Darlin Soldier, and that would do it by itself. We have a whole bunch of, or well, at least 1 mill card. Margarita. I mean, technically the bleed is useful, because it does help to set up our Regis in our deck. So I think we will probably go that route. Although Drummond Queensguard, having a Skellige Bronze unit, even a Skellige Warrior in particular, is really helpful sometimes, because there are a lot of high provision cost cards of the Skellige variety. I always do this. I always forget to start off with Fruits of Ysgith. It's 1 point we missed there, unfortunately, by triggering the Thrive right off the bat. But as I was saying, there are a lot of cards that can get you back a Skellige Bronze unit, or in some cases specifically Skellige Warriors, from your graveyard. And so having 1 or 2 of those in your graveyard can be, it's not guaranteed by any means, but it can be solid value. Damien is a big play, allowing them to use Enslave 6 a second time round, so we would like to get rid of you, and we can. And I think we almost certainly should, even if Ratcatcher S is really tempting here as a 19-point, or 9, not 19, 9-point play. I mean, any alternatives? Eton is not targeted or enough damage to take care of Damien, so yeah, I think it's just the outright removal here. And that was a, what is that, a 6 provision cost card? So that gives us a little more time for our cards to further develop here, because we did have a whole bunch of low provision cost cards. But as we're starting to see, some of these are looking a little more intriguing now. Vigo's Muzzle, okay, that does hurt, especially when we don't have much in the way of units here. And now, unfortunately, Prophet is, well, completely useless. Its deployability, at least, because all their cards are going to change on their next turn. Unlikely we get the value out of the coins. Stennis, we don't really want to boost a Thrive unit. That's not helpful. Hey, here's one of the ways you can get a Skellige unit out from your graveyard. So, in case you were wondering, that's one of them. Blue Boy could be kind of useful. Do they have sources of damage right now? We could deliberately put Blue Boy in a row by itself. In fact, I am very tempted to do that. That is almost certainly what we're going to do here. And force them to take the damage from Blue Boy, from their Saber-tooth Tiger. It does mean we're going to keep this Gurnicor's Fruit in a row by itself, so it will get damaged and destroyed. But we can, of course, create another one, and it was only on 2 power, so it's not like that's even a huge deal to lose that. So I am curious to see if they do anything about Blue Boy. Okay, Lydia can be quite solid. They'll use the Mastercrafted Spear to get rid of Blue Boy. Okay, this round is very quickly not looking great for us, but we are starting to get to the point now where we'll get some bigger cards. Siri Nova, we do have cards that are over 9 provisions, so that unfortunately does not work. But Curse of Corruption will destroy the 6-point roach. It's still just a in total 6-point play, which is not all that exciting. Philippe is probably the best option for us here, unless we think we just want to pass early, or we could double down and Thrive. Is Gunnercore's fruit? It's not an insectoid, is it? It's not. So Kikimore Queen, I mean, it is double Thrive, but not really sure that's valuable enough to us. Basically, it's a question of to Philippe or not to Philippe. I think we'll give it a little more time here by using him. Okay, Gezros, huge play. Although we did play in the range row, so they aren't going to be able to deal damage with him. Could be a solid target to lock with Philippe. If we could get some additional setup here to make that happen right off the bat. Hand boosting does not help us at all. Keldar is close to triggering that Adrenaline, which is useful. Colossal Ifrit, I mean, there are 3 cards in this row right now, which is something. Uma's Curse, no idea what it'll be. Land of 1,000 Fables, though, gives us the ability to play a... special card from our deck. I like that. I like that a lot, in fact. I'm thinking Crimson Curse here. It's a little bit slow, which is the downside. But it does help us apply some more statuses, and I think we will try to target Gezros here. It's going to take a little bit of time. First, it's Doomed. Then, it is Lock after that. But they're not going to get any value on this turn anyway, because he'd be moving to the melee row and dealing damage, and there's nothing in the melee row to damage. Okay, here's the leader ability on Philippe, which is... it's a big play. Then again, this might just be a good sign for us to say, you know what? If you want to make that kind of commitment, we'll let you, and we'll take this opportunity to end this round with 1 extra card. We do have some big cards here. Damien, I mean, then again, that's maybe not the most helpful with Fruits of Ysgith. In fact, does that even work with Fruits of Ysgith? I don't think it would. Technically, we could seize Philippe back, for what it's worth. It would take a little bit of time, and I think there's a big enough difference here that may not be all that helpful. Eretein, we do have some frost synergies. If we could get the Winter Queen out here with another row of frost, that'd be useful, but that's not guaranteed by any means. I think we do still pass here, because I think the clincher was when they used their leader ability. If they're going to sacrifice that, that's a big leader ability, and I think we'll let them do that. And we got a little bit of setup for our Regis as well. Okay, so let's put Wild Hunt Rider back into our deck. I think we do have some high provision cost cards. 10, and 11, and another 11, and another 11. So this is a little dangerous having a bunch of high provision cost cards, especially if they have the same number of provisions, because that means, I mean, you can play one of them, but then the other ones are going to turn to 12s. You play one of these, last one's going to turn to a 13. If you don't play all of them, then that means one of them's turning into 14, at which point they're probably going to be a scenario. So dumping one of them might not be a terrible idea. And SU, since you're at least a monster. Oh, but we don't want Winter Queen. That's a risk we took by using our last mulligan. So yeah, it means I guess, especially because they're likely to try pass in this round, we probably didn't need to be that picky about our hand going into round 2. But yeah, we would have liked to have at least had the option of getting Winter Queen thinned out from our deck for a little bit of extra value. But they're playing, so maybe it will matter. Maybe fine-tuning our hand will matter. Johnny is, I don't know what you're thinking there, because it's just a 4-point body, and it takes some time to do anything with him, and we can just casually destroy him and get coins in the process, and I think that's what we're going to want to do here, because we're going to want to play one of our high provision cost cards. It's either Professor at 12, Monroe at 12, Siggy at 11 is not quite as urgent. Technically, we can get carryover from Ronvid, potentially, which would be useful. You're also 11, but I think... where'd you go? This is just a little too good of a fit to pass up on. deals just enough damage to get rid of you. So we're outpacing you. We have a little bit of coins, which may be relevant. It could open up some doors for future Syndicate card plays. Hey, She Who Knows. I mean, that's really the dream for us, is to get some form of carryover. And making sure that they either don't get Sabbath or that we shut this down would be the Archie. Oh, also, what did I say? I'm pretty sure I said that I always forget to play Bruxa Ysgith on my first turn. There you have it. I forgot to play it on our first turn. Leo can immediately destroy you. That is very clearly our answer here. He is a 10, and this is the problem. Is now that means Monroe's going to turn to a 13, you're going to turn to a 14, you're going to turn to a 13, so we're going to get a bunch of high provision cost cards that are going to be scenarios that are not, or very likely to be scenarios that we can't use or get very little value out of, or if we don't play those scenarios, then they turn to 4 provision cost cards, and then they're going to be weak pretty much by definition. So that's why we anticipated that could happen a little bit, but I think this is still worth it, at least in this instance, because getting rid of a She Who Knows is a very big deal. Okay, it's Siege, so yes, now that's the situation they find themselves in, where they're forced to play scenarios. We might need to do the same here. Oh, or we could Oniro. In which case, I think we'd go for Unseen Elder, actually. Because Regis is solid, but if we can set up Regis with Unseen Elder and then maybe still use Regis in a later round, round 3, that'd be great. Because we don't really need the huge points right now. We have a pretty solid lead at the moment. So I think we can be a little more patient here and go Oniro into... We could just go Old Speartip and say, here's another form of Point Slam. Or we could even go Old Speartip asleep and thin it out that way, but I think we'll go Unseen Elder. And let's put you in this row, where the Reinforced Trebuchet is not going to hit you. We have Devotion, so that means we get the extra procs of bleed damage. So that's very nice. And that's going to make it really hard if they're going to try to keep on bleeding us here. But they will attempt to do so. Ill-advised as it may be at this point. And now... I mean, if we can play the high provision cost cards, we would like to do that. So Vi, although it's just a 7-point body, it does trigger Thrive, so it's in truth more like 8 points in total. And, I mean, if it's not that, then it really should be Vi. Otherwise, it's turning into a 4 provision cost card on our next turn, and we don't really want that to happen. So let's... I guess we'll play you here. Not as important to stay alive as, say, something like Unseen Elder was. Okay, and at this point, we are getting close to the point where we can just flat out call their buff. Their bluff, I should say. And, do the highest unit. I mean, it is Vi. We would destroy Vi and trigger its Death Wish for what it's worth, which is saying something, but it's probably still not worth it. The question is, can they catch us with 2 more cards and no leader ability? It would be difficult, but not impossible. So, I think we probably should play at least 1 more card here, but it would be really nice to guarantee that we get even more card advantage. Could consider using Land of 1,000 Fables to transform this Scorch. Let's at least see what it does. That might be a solid option. It's functionally the same thing. What the heck? Scorch turns into Villain Trettenmirth? It is the unit version of the same card that we just had? Okay. Tell you what we could do. We could use Elias to either destroy Gurnakor's Fruit, or maybe even Leo. So Synthesis Blaze is technically a little bit better, probably. We could have destroyed... We had a bunch of ways. We could have destroyed 5. Could have done it this way as well. Okay, so we're going to look very critically at what they play here. They are playing. Because if it's not solid, then we will probably pass and dare them to catch us. Ooh, well, if we couldn't destroy Vi, then they'll find a way to do it for us. They did make up a lot of ground here, though. They did make up a lot of ground. So I think... Ooh. I think we will proceed. And why not proceed with some carryover from the Phoenix? I like the looks of that quite a bit. Because we don't need a ton of points. But it keeps us in this round. And we can then, what, with 5 points of damage, get rid of their automatic booster. And at this point, I mean, Surely they are not about to play this last turn, right? Surely they are not about to play this last turn. Okay, so we will still have card advantage going into round 3. And for what it's worth, with all the bleed from the Unseen Elder, Regis Reborn is up to 9 base power. That's solid. I mean, as for whether we're going to have a way to get him out from our deck, that's maybe a different question. We have a few other point slams as well, so that's looking good too. But we will take the round 2 win. Actually, that's going to make Regis a little bit bigger still. Okay, so we drew into a whole bunch of high provision cost cards, which is dangerous, because 13 provisions means you're going to likely turn into a scenario on our next turn, so I think we're probably mulliganing both of you, and Speartip could be our first play. It will transform into a 12, which is, I mean, it's pretty big, but less likely to be something unplayable. Naglfar, obviously nice to have a tutor, but not going to happen. Turning that into a 10 is not bad, though. Okay, this looks solid. We have some really big finishers here, potentially. In a short round, that could be quite useful. And Bloody Mistress, plus our leader ability, if we can get up to Sabbath, could be very, very helpful. Siada is quite the risk. No idea if we'd find a way to put her order ability to use before she gets locked or destroyed, or we might just never get a card with a deploy ability. So that's a pretty big risk. I think we go Bloody Mistress. The reason why you could potentially justify going Siana here is because she is our highest provision cost card. Next turn, she's going to be a 13, and if we don't like the card that's 13 provisions, then she's a 14 on the turn after that, at which point she's likely to be a scenario, which is not going to be very helpful. Let's go for Ysgith first. I remembered once, and we want to try to load up in this row as much as possible, and we can get a little more points from the Phoenix, but not going to flip it just yet, because we don't need to. We're not about to get Sabbath, and we might as well deny them the opportunity to target another unit. Okay, it's Lacerate, which destroys our original Gurnet Chorus Root, and actually might have been interesting to use Yennefer's Divination on our previous turn, to tell you the truth, because we had some really tall units in our deck. So that might have been worth at least testing the waters with. It would be a risk. It would be a dice roll, but be kind of curious to see how that would play out. Okay. Ooh, and Dandelion might be the tutor we're looking for to see if we can get ourselves either an Oniro to get one of our big cards, or going straight into a big card like Regis, like Vi, like... we did get rid of the original old Speartip, which kind of stinks, because that would have been really useful. But I think that's still worth giving a shot here, and worst comes to worst, we just play Selkirk as our second card. So we'll give it a shot here. Selkirk does need to go melee room. We'd like to get... I forgot the leader ability! And now we're going to need to play 2 cards. We could have boosted up our leader ability twice. Lids, man. Okay, so here's the thing. Selkirk is a better card, but Old Speartip we can play in the range row and get closer to reaching Sabbath. Then again, we have a large enough advantage here. Now we'll use the leader ability. I'm sorry. I will mess that up every turn. But now I mean, it's going to be late enough in the round that if we even were to trigger Sabbath, we're not going to get many points out of Bloody Mistress anyway. Their problem is, they dealt damage last turn. Damage is not good enough. Because we have last save, we can always use our leader ability to get at least 1 point on the board, so they could quite literally destroy every single unit that we have, and at the end of the game, we can just throw down a 1-point leader ability and we still win. So they need some way to put up a ton of points here, and that is a scenario that they don't really have the means to set up, or at least it'll be quite difficult for them to do that. Okay, so now we're looking at Morkvarg, Egmund, or Masquerade Ball, because we did not play that really high provision cost card. I don't even remember what this was. But technically, it'd be nice to play something in the range row where we could get up to Sabbath. This is a 4-point conversion waiting to happen, so functionally, we're at 14 here. We would like to play Egmund in the melee row to use his order ability. He does still boost in the range row, though. Does that get us up to, what, a 15 at the end of this turn? Functionally, a 19? That might be just barely good enough. Hey, Lids, what if you had used your leader ability earlier? Look, man, I know. So we could have, and arguably should have, used Selkirk to get rid of this Furnace Heals Commando, because at least on that turn it was the only elf on their side of the board, so it was getting boosted, and, I mean, it's a 4-point body. They should go with a Bear Witcher, yeah, to hit this. That would punish us for not having used him previously. It's the right move. Okay, and so now... Do we have an organic card in our deck? Don't think we do. We do not. So that's a 2-point body. We have beasts. You're not a beast. You considered a beast? You are technically considered a beast. You are not. But if we do the conversion now, and we play you, like so, we can deal just enough damage. No, it's you down to 3. Selkirk. Technically, yes, you can hit this. And it's bad. So we brick Selkirk, but it does technically work, ever so slightly. Here is the Sabbath we were looking for. So Synthesis has immunity, so we can't target it. Not that that matters, because they somehow need to find a way to manufacture 14 plus more points. And in truth, even more than that, because we're going to get the boost off Gurnakora as well. And as I was saying before, that's just not feasible as things currently stand. And realizing this, they rage quit. So there's a look at a Monsters deck for the new Patience is a Virtue seasonal event. If you liked the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment down below and let me know which other cards, archetypes, and factions you'd like us to experiment with next. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.